Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Casey, and today I'm going to be doing a sew along for the first garment pattern that I ever released, the Fern top. Now this sew along is long overdue, and when I released the pattern, I was fairly new to pattern making and selling, and I just never got around to doing the sew along. It has been one of my most popular patterns, I think because it's very beginner friendly, it's easy to put together, it comes together quickly, and it's a great scrap buster. It's also easy to fit because it's kind of a loose, boxy fit. Now I am going to be doing a very simple pattern hack to turn this into a dress. Over the years, I've seen several people make this into a dress. It's a really great dress, and I recently was very inspired by Karina over at Lifting Pins and Needles. She made a red version in a cute little dress, and I was like, okay, I gotta make this thing. I gotta make it. So today I'm gonna do it. Like most of my patterns, this pattern comes with cup options, so you can customize the fit at the bust. I'm gonna be making the C cup today. So one thing to note is that if you're not using one of the C or D cup patterns, you're just gonna use the front and back sleeve for both the front and the back sleeve. Now, if you are doing the C or D cup, this piece that says front and back sleeve will just be the back sleeve. And then you'll have a separate piece for the front sleeve that has the dart in it. And I know this looks like a kind of strange sleeve piece, but this will all make sense as we get into the pattern. It's just a grown on sleeve. So anyway, it'll all make sense once we get together. I am using a just kind of off-white linen. I think this is 100% linen. Got it at Joann Fabrics when they were closing. Got a somewhat okay deal on it. So anyway, I just already had this in my stash and I thought it'd be really cute for a summer dress. There is a neckline expansion pack for this pattern to do either a square neck or a V-neck. The original pattern comes with a crew neck style. I personally really love the square neck, so I'm gonna be making the square neck. That's the one I always go to with this pattern, and the square neck is in the expansion pack. And I'll put a link to both the pattern and the expansion pack in the description below this video, so be sure to check that out. So because I'm gonna be doing this as a dress, I'm just going to lengthen the peplum skirt piece. So this comes with two skirts. One's a peplum that has a little bit more volume in the skirt, and the other one is just more straight. I'm doing the peplum so that I can clear my hips and it'll be wide enough and I'll have enough ease in the hips. Normally I would split the pattern and then spread it apart and tape extra fabric, but I can do this without actually having to go through all that trouble. So I'm just gonna start by tracing the bottom edge, then I'll move the pattern piece up to get the length that I need in the skirt, and I'll trace the top, and then I will connect the top and the bottom at the side and kind of true the side seam. And I'll cut two pieces like this. I'll cut one for the front and one for the back. And I'm just using these heat soluble fabric marking pins to trace the pattern onto my fabric, and then I can iron this and the ink will disappear. So I've got all of my pieces cut, and the first thing that I want to do is stay stitch the neckline. So I am making the square neck version. I'm going to stay stitch the neckline of this just to make sure it doesn't get too stretched out during construction, and I'll also stay stitch the neckline of the center back bodice. So next I just want to sew the darts in the front sleeve, and you'll only have to do this if you are sewing the C or the D cup. When I get to the end of the dart, instead of back stitching to lock the stitch, I'm just going to leave my thread tails long and tie a little knot to complete the stitch and keep it from unraveling. So I'm going to be constructing this with French seams, and the first step is going to be to attach the sleeves to the center front bodice. Now, one of the most common questions that I get about this pattern, or I guess the most common complaint when people email me, is that they say that the sleeve does not work. And usually it's because they are installing the sleeve upside down. This kind of looks like an arm side, but it's not. This is actually the underarm. So you want to make sure that your sleeve is facing this way, because this is the top, this is the shoulder, this is the sleeve opening here because this is a grown-on sleeve. So we're going to attach this first wrong sides together because we're doing a French seam. And I'll sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance here to attach this. And if you're sewing the C or the D cup, there is a slight curve to this and you'll kind of have to ease it into the center front bodice. So now that I've got both of the sleeves attached, I'm going to finish the French seams by first trimming down the seam allowance in half. Then I will press those seam allowances open. Then I'll flip this over and fold right along that seam and press it again. Then I'll stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance to complete the French seam. And I'll do that for both of the seams. And I'm just gonna press that seam allowance away from the center front bodice and toward the sleeve. And I'll do the same thing for the center back bodice and the back sleeves. So now I can sew the shoulders together. So I've got the back bodice wrong side facing up. I'm going to lay the front bodice wrong side facing down. So I've got wrong sides together. And then I will sew the shoulders together with a French seam. So that's why I've got these wrong sides together first. And I'll just press those seams toward the back bodice. So I'm going to set the bodice aside for now and work on the facings. And the way I like to finish facings is to attach the interfacing right sides together. So the smooth side of the interfacing with the right side of fabric, and I've pinned that around the long edge of the facing. I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the edge. Then I'll flip this right side out and adhere the interfacing to the facing. And I'll do that for both the front and the back facings. And I went ahead and did that for both of the facings, and it just gives a really nice clean finish on the edges there. Next, I'm going to sew the shoulder seams of the facings together, and I'm not going to do a French seam on this. You can if you really want to, but this is going to be concealed anyway once the facings are finished. So I'm just going to do a 5/8 inch seam allowance on both of the shoulders and then press that open. I'm actually going to trim that down too, now that I think about it. All right, so now we have got the main part of the bodice sewn. We've got our facings prepped, and now I want to attach the facing to the bodice. So I'm going to lay the bodice right side facing up. I'm just going to kind of open the whole thing up here. And then I'm going to lay the facings right sides together with the bodice and align it around the neckline, making sure to match up the shoulder seams. So I pinned this all the way around the neckline, and I'm just going to sew this with a 5/8 inch seam allowance around the entire perimeter. Then I'll grade the seam allowance, flip the facing toward the interior of the bodice, and I will give it a good press. To aid in keeping the facing turned toward the interior, I'm just going to go around and understitch the seam allowance to the facing. So I'm going to make sure the seam allowance is pressed this way and just stitch really close to that seam all the way around the perimeter on the facing side. I'm also going to stitch down at the shoulder seam just to keep the facing tacked to the shoulder here. All right, so the hardest part of this whole project is over. Now we can attach the skirt to the bodice and then sew the side seams. Now I am sewing the version B skirt, so this is gonna be the skirt that has a couple of pleats in the front, and I need to prep the skirt first before I do that. So I'm just gonna fold the fabric, match up the notches, baste that position in place, then I'll flatten that fold and center it over where I basted it to create a pleat. And I'll do that on both the front and the back skirt before I attach it to the bodice. So now we can attach the skirt to the bodice. So I'm just gonna open up the bodice here and lay it right side facing up. You could do this with a French seam, but for this seam, I don't like to do it because it's a little bulky. So I'm just gonna lay this right sides together with the bodice, and I'm gonna align the pleat locations with the seam where I attach the sleeve to the bodice. And the other version of this does not have pleats. It will be attached exactly the same way. And then I'll sew that with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish the seam allowance with the serger, press the seam allowance toward the skirt, and then I'll do the same thing for the back bodice. With both sides of the skirt attached, I can sew the side seams with a French seam. And the last step is to hem the sleeves and the skirt. On the sleeves, I'm just gonna do a small 1/4 inch hem. So I'm gonna fold twice and press. And then I'm gonna do a wide hem on the bottom because I just like the look of that. So I'll probably do about a 2 inch hem. I gotta take your collar off. You're making so much noise. You always do this when I'm trying to film. Every time. You come in here, you start playing with your toys, jingling your little collar. Okay, now you're free. You're free! All right, another pattern. Sewalong in the books, in the YouTube library. I've put a link to the pattern and the neckline expansion pack in the description below this video, so be sure to check that out to get all of the pattern details. Sizing information, yardage information, although if you do want to lengthen this into a dress, probably gonna wanna add about a 1/2 yard extra fabric to the yardage that is suggested in the pattern booklet. Now I sewed the version with just a simple hem on the sleeves, but there is another version that has a cuff on the sleeve. And then there's also a version with just a straight skirt that doesn't have any pleats in the skirt. I don't know if that one would have gone over my hips if I had done that one, so that's why I decided to do the pleated skirt. But I also think the pleats are, you know, kind of minimal enough that it doesn't feel too frou-frou, which I'm not really a big frou-frou kind of dress person. I do like things a little bit more minimal and just kind of easygoing, and I think this fits the bill. Now, sewing with linen is great. I love sewing with linen, but it's always a little bit stiff the first time you use it, which makes it really easy to sew with, but it does soften up a lot with washing and wearing. Like, it gets so comfy and wonderful, and it drapes beautifully. It does get wrinkly, but that's kind of one of the characteristics of linen that I don't mind at all. I think it adds to the character of the fabric. So I would like this to fit just a little bit closer, but the ease that I've included in this pattern allows you to pop it right overhead. And I think if I went any less, like took in the ease at all on the side seams, it'd be harder to get it on overhead. But one idea that I had was to add like a tie at the side seams that you could just kind of cinch the waist and kind of tie it back and make it fit just a little bit closer. I think that would be really cute. And also, because my projects never are done, I feel like I might end up dyeing this. I went with this white linen because this is what I had in my stash. I stocked up on a lot of linen when Joann Fabrics was going out of business. I kind of wanted to see what it looked like as a white dress and see if I was actually going to wear it. If I find that I'm not wearing it that much because it's white and I don't want to get it dirty, I may go ahead and just dye it. I think that this pattern would be so cute with some embroidery. I have thought that basically since I designed the pattern. Again, something I have not gotten around to trying yet. So I bought this shirt a couple of years ago when I went to Spain. I got it at, I think, Mango? Yeah, Mango. And I just love the embroidery on it. It's just so, so pretty. I think something like that would be adorable on a top like this. The square neckline, the V-neck, the crew neck, all of it I think would be really cute with some really fun floral embroidery. So maybe one day. Honestly, I'm probably never going to get around to it, but a girl can dream, and I think something like this would be really cute on a dress like this. Please be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release new videos in the future. I am trying to kind of ramp back up into some more sewing projects. I do have more house projects that I'm going to be working on. For those of you that don't know, I have a whole other channel where I do home renovation projects. So there's been a little bit of a lull in that over the last couple of weeks, and I've gotten a couple of sewing projects in. I also have a Patreon page. It's just Pattern Scout over on Patreon. And I just shared a free apron pattern last week for an apron video that I did here on the channel. So if you're interested in that, you can get that there. If you don't want to join Patreon, you can just buy the pattern on my website. I'll put a link to that as well in the description. So thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you in the next video. Bye.